September 23rd, 1936. 8:47 p.m. According to witnesses who were present, Bumpy Johnson stood outside Rao's restaurant in East Harlem, alone, unarmed, preparing to walk into a room filled with 9 of the most dangerous men in New York. Inside that restaurant sat representatives from all 5 families: the Genovese, the Luciano, the Gambino, the Bonanno, the Colombo. Men who controlled bootlegging, extortion, murder for hire, gambling across the entire city. Men who'd killed for less than what Bumpy Johnson was about to demand. Bumpy's associate, Illinois Gordon, stood beside him on the sidewalk, his hand on his piece, nervous sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool September air. "Bumpy, you don't have to do this," Illinois said quietly. "We can find another way. We can negotiate through intermediaries. We can—" "No." Bumpy interrupted, his voice calm, steady. "They asked for a meeting. They want to see who I am, what I'm made of. If I send someone else, if I bring an army, they'll know I'm afraid." "You should be afraid. That's 9 mob bosses in there, 9 families. They could make you disappear tonight, and nobody would ever find your body." Bumpy looked at Illinois, and in that look was something Illinois had seen before. Not fear, not anger, just absolute certainty. "They could try," Bumpy said. "But they won't, because they need what I have. And tonight, I'm going to make them admit it." Bumpy adjusted his tie, buttoned his suit jacket, and walked toward the door. Illinois called after him, "At least take your gun." Bumpy didn't turn around. "If I need a gun in there, Illinois, I'm already dead." He pushed open the door and disappeared inside. What nobody knew at the time, what the history books would never fully capture, is that, according to sources close to the negotiations, Bumpy Johnson walked into that restaurant with nothing but his reputation, and a plan so audacious that it would rewrite the power structure of organized crime in New York forever. To understand what happened that night at Rao's, you need to understand the state of Harlem in 1936. By the mid-30s, Prohibition had ended, but organized crime was more powerful than ever. The Italian mob controlled most of New York. They ran the docks, the unions, the gambling, the loan sharking, the protection rackets. But there was one territory they couldn't fully control: Harlem. Harlem's numbers. Racket generated an estimated $300,000 a week. $300,000 in cash, flowing through black-owned operations, controlled by black operators, protected by the community. The Italian families had tried for years to muscle in. They'd sent enforcers, they'd made offers, they'd used intimidation. But Harlem was different. Harlem had Madame Stephanie, Street Claire, the Queen of Numbers. And Madame Street Claire had Bumpy Johnson. By 1936, Bumpy Johnson was 31 years old. He'd been Madame Street, Claire's chief enforcer for 6 years. He'd fought off Dutch Schultz's attempts to take Harlem. He'd pushed back against Italian mobsters who thought they could just walk into the neighborhood and take what they wanted. Bumpy had built a reputation, not just as muscle, as a strategist, someone who understood that power wasn't just about violence. It was about control, leverage, psychology. But by September 1936, things were changing. Madame Street Claire was getting older, talking about retirement. Dutch Schultz had been murdered a year earlier, creating a power vacuum, and the 5 families were getting impatient. They wanted Harlem, and they were willing to negotiate for it. September 18th, 1936, 5 days before the meeting. Bumpy received a message from Lucky Luciano, the most powerful mobster in New York and the architect of the modern Mafia's organizational structure. The message was simple, delivered by a courier to Bumpy's apartment on Edgecombe Avenue. Mr. Luciano requests a meeting. September 23rd. Rouse Restaurant. 8 p.m. Come. Alone. We have a proposal. Bumpy read the message 3 times. Illinois Gordon was with him. It's a trap, Bump. Has to be. They're going to kill you. Bumpy shook his head, slowly. If they wanted me dead, I'd already be dead. They wouldn't send a formal invitation. They'd just do it. Then what do tell 'em? They want? They want to descript, make a deal. They want Harlem's numbers operation, and they think I'm the one who can give it to them. And are you? Bumpy looked out the window at Harlem spread below, his neighborhood, his people. I'm the one who here can make sure they never get it. But I need to hear what they're offering first. Over the next 5 days, Bumpy prepared. Not with guns, not with muscle, with information. He had his people talk, to bartenders, to numbers runners, to anyone who had connections to the Italian families. He learned who would be at the meeting, what each family wanted, what leverage each boss had, what their weaknesses were. Frank Costello, from the Luciano family, wanted legitimacy, wanted to move into legal businesses. Vito Genovese wanted respect, wanted to be recognized as a power player equal to Luciano. Carlo Gambino was conservative, didn't want war, wanted stable income streams. Joe Bonanno was ambitious, always looking to expand. Joe Profaci was old school, loyal to tradition. 9 men. 9 different motivations. 9 different pressure points. And Bumpy planned to exploit every single one. September 23rd, 1936. 8:50 p.m. According to multiple accounts of that night, when Bumpy Johnson walked into Rouse Restaurant, the first thing he noticed was the silence. The restaurant had been cleared. No other customers, no waiters, just a long table in the back. Room with 9 men sitting around it. All of them turning to watch as Bumpy entered. Lucky Luciano sat at the head of the table. To his right, Frank Costello. To his left, Vito. Genovese. Around the table, Carlo Gambino, Joe Bonanno, Joe Profaci, and 3 underbosses, representing other interests. Every man at that table had killed. Every man had ordered deaths. Between them, they controlled An empire worth hundreds of millions of dollars. And they were all staring at one black man who'd walked in alone, unarmed, wearing a perfectly tailored suit and an expression of absolute calm. Luciano gestured to an texter. Empty chair at the far end of the table. Mr. Johnson, thank you for coming. Please, sit. Bumpy walked the length of the table slowly, deliberately. He didn't hurry, didn't show nervousness. Just walked like he owned every step, making eye contact with each man as he passed. When he reached the chair, he didn't sit immediately. He stood behind it, one hand resting on the prodigious back. Before I won. Sit, Bumpy said, his voice carrying clearly through the silent room. I want to make something clear. I came alone because you asked me to. I came unarmed because I respect the invitation. But if anyone in this room thinks that makes me vulnerable, you're welcome to test that theory, right? Now. The room stayed silent. Bumpy let the moment hang there. Let every man at that table understand that he wasn't afraid, that walking in unarmed wasn't weakness, it was confidence. Then he sat down. Luciano smiled. Slightly. I like you, Bumpy. You got balls. Not many men would walk in here the way you just did. Not many men get a juror. Invited, Bumpy replied. Luciano leaned back in his chair. Let's get to business. You know why we asked you here. Harlem's numbers. Correct. He's been patient. We've tried to work with Madame Street Claire, but she's stubborn, old-fashioned. She doesn't understand that times are changing. She understands. Perfectly, Bumpy said. She just doesn't agree with you. Vito Genovese leaned forward, his voice sharp. We're not asking for her agreement. We're making you an offer, a generous one. Bumpy turned his attention to Genovese. I'm listening. Frank Costello spoke up, his tone more diplomatic than Genovese's. The proposal is simple. We take over operations in Harlem. Management, distribution, enforcement. We bring efficiency, organization, protection from law enforcement. In return, the existing operators, including you, get to keep running street-level operations. You collect, you pay up, you get your percentage. What percentage? Bumpy asked. 20% of what you collect. Bumpy didn't react, just sat there, processing. Carlo Gambino added, That's a fair deal, Mr. Johnson. You keep working, you keep earning, but under our protection. No more wars, no more violence, stability. Bumpy looked around, the table, meeting each man's eyes. Then he spoke, and what he said next, according to those who were there, changed everything. No. The word hung in the air like a gunshot. Vito Genovese's face darkened. Excuse me? I said no. Your offer is rejected. Joe Bonanno's hand moved toward his jacket. Frank Costello raised a hand, stopping him. Bumpy, Luciano said, his voice still calm but with an edge now. I don't think you understand the situation. This isn't a negotiation. This is us telling you how things are going to be. Bumpy leaned forward, elbows on the table, and when he spoke, his voice was quiet but carried absolute authority. No, Mr. Luciano. You don't understand the situation. You invited me here. Because you need something from me. You need my cooperation. You need me to convince the operators in Harlem to accept your deal. You need me to keep the streets quiet. Because without me, you don't have Harlem. You have a war. Are you threatening us? Genovese growled. I'm stating facts, Bumpy replied, not even looking at Genovese, keeping his eyes locked on Luciano. You know what happened when Dutch Schultz tried to take Harlem by force. You know he sent 12 men and only one came back. You know that Harlem isn't like Brooklyn or the Bronx. It's different. And you can't control it the way you control other neighborhoods. Luciano's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. Recognition. Respect. So what are you proposing? Luciano asked. And this is where, according to legend, Bumpy Johnson made the move that would define his legacy. I'm proposing a Bacchus partnership, not you taking over, not you telling us what to do. A real partnership. 50-50. The room erupted. 50-50? Genovese shouted. You're out of your mind. You walk in here with nothing and demand half? Bonanno added. But Luciano held up his hand again, silencing them. He studied Bumpy carefully. Explain. Bumpy's voice remained calm, measured. You provide protection from law enforcement. You provide access to your political connections. You provide insurance against other families trying to move in. In return, Harlem's operators pay you 50% of profits, not revenue, profits after expenses. That's robbery, Genovese muttered. No, Bumpy said, turning to Genovese now. That's business. You want Harlem's 300,000 a week. Fine, but you need us to collect it. You need our people to run it. You need the community to accept it. Without that, you have nothing. With us as partners, you have 150,000 a week in pure profit without lifting a finger. No risk, no violence, no war, just money. With Fettered. Frank Costello was listening intently now. He understood what Bumpy was doing. This was a business proposition, not a threat. Carlo Gambino spoke up, his tone thoughtful. And what guarantees do we have that Harlem won't just cut us out once we provide the protection? My word, Bumpy said simply. And my reputation. I've never broken a deal. Never. Betrayed a partner. You ask around about Bumpy Johnson, and you'll hear the same thing. I'm loyal to my agreements. Always. Luciano leaned back, thinking. The room was tense, silent. Then Luciano looked at Bumpy and asked the question that would determine everything. Why should I trust you? Bumpy met his gaze. Because I walked in here unarmed. Because I sat at this table surrounded by 9 of you and told you no when I could have said yes and avoided all of this. Because I'm not afraid of you, which means I'm not desperate. And desperate men make bad partners. I'm offering you a deal that makes us both money. That's all this is. Business. Luciano studied him for a long moment. Then he turned to the other bosses. Step outside. I want to talk to Mr. Johnson alone. One by one, the mobsters stood and left the room, some reluctantly, some angry, but they all obeyed Luciano. When the door closed, it was just Lucky Luciano and Bumpy Johnson. Two men. Alone. In a room that smelled of cigars and power. Act 3. The Deal. What happened in that room during the next 20 minutes has been debated for decades. Some accounts say Luciano threatened Bumpy, told him he was making a mistake. Others say Bumpy threatened Luciano, reminded him what happened to Dutch Schultz. But, according to sources closest to both men, what actually happened was a conversation between two strategists who recognized each other's intelligence. Luciano reportedly spoke first. "You know, I could kill you right now. Have my men come back. Put two in your head, dump you in the East River. Nobody would ever know. If you could," Bumpy agreed. "But you won't, because you're smarter than that." "Am I?" "You built the man. Commission. You created the five-family structure. You ended the old wars. You understand that cooperation is more profitable than conflict. That's why we're having this conversation instead of shooting each other." Luciano smiled. "Slightly. You've done your homework." "I always do." Luciano lit a cigar, offered one to Bumpy. Bumpy accepted. For a moment, they sat there, two men smoking, sizing each other up. 50-50 is too much, Luciano said finally. 60-40 is too little, Bumpy countered. What about 70-30? You get 30, we get 70. Bumpy shook his head. 40-60. We get 40, you get 60. Final offer. Luciano considered. This, and you speak for all of Harlem? I speak for the craze. Operators who matter, the ones who control the real money. You get them, you get Harlem, and I can deliver them. Why are you doing this? Luciano asked. You could just keep running things the body way they are. Why partner with us at all? And here, according to the legend, Bumpy said something that revealed his true genius. Because Madame Street Claire is retiring, and when she does, there's going to be a power vacuum. Every hustler in Harlem is going to try to grab a piece. It'll be chaos, war. The police will crack down. Everyone loses. But if I have the backing of the five families, if I have your protection, I can keep Harlem stable. I can control the transition. And we both make money. Everyone wins. Luciano stared at him. Then he started laughing. You son of a bitch. You're not just negotiating for Harlem. You're negotiating to become the boss. Bumpy didn't confirm or deny, just smiled slightly. Luciano shook his head, still laughing. You got balls, Bumpy. I'll give you that. So we have a flight. Deal? Luciano really thought about it. Then he extended his hand across the table. 40-60. You get 40, we get 60. You keep the peace in Harlem. We provide protection and political connections. Any disputes, we sit down and talk. No wars. Business only. Bumpy shook his hand. Business only, Bumpy agreed. Luciano called the other bosses back in. When they returned, Luciano made the announcement. We have an agreement, 40-60 split. Bumpy Johnson represents Harlem's interests. We provide protection and Infrastructure. This is a partnership, not a takeover. Vito Genovese looked furious. Charlie, this is final. Luciano cut him off. This is my decision. Anyone who doesn't like it can take it up with me privately. Nobody spoke up. Luciano turned back to Bumpy. We'll draw up papers, make it official, but for now we have a handshake. That good enough for you? It's good. Enough, Bumpy said. He stood, buttoned his jacket, and walked toward the door. As he reached it, Frank Costello spoke up. Bumpy, you really walked in here with no gun? Bumpy turned back, smiled. I didn't need one. I had something better. What's that? I had leverage, and I had the one thing you can't buy or intimidate. I had the truth. You needed me more than I needed you. And with that, Bumpy Johnson walked out of Rao's restaurant the same way he'd walked in. Alone. Unarmed. Unafraid. But now, he walked out as something more than an enforcer. He walked out as Harlem's future. By the next morning, word had spread through Harlem's underworld. Bumpy Johnson had sat with the 5 families. He'd negotiated a deal. 40-60 split. Partnership, not. Surrender. The response was mixed. Some operators were angry. They saw it as selling out, giving the Italians a cut they didn't deserve. But others, the smarter ones, understood what Bumpy had done. He'd secured protection that would keep Harlem independent while giving the mob just enough to prevent a war. Over the next year, the deal proved itself. Harlem's numbers. Operation continued to grow. Police raids decreased. Rival families stayed out. And the money flowed. Bumpy's 40% made him wealthy. But more importantly, it made him powerful. With the backing of the 5 families, no one in Harlem could challenge him. When Madame Street Claire retired in 1938, Bumpy Johnson took over completely. Not through violence. Through the legitimacy he'd earned at that table with Lucky, Luciano, the Italian mobsters. At that meeting had mixed reactions over the years. Frank Costello reportedly told people, Bumpy Johnson was the smartest man I ever negotiated with. He walked in with nothing and walked out with everything. Thanks for watching. Vito Genovese never forgave the deal, saw it as weakness on Luciano's part. But Lucky Luciano himself reportedly said years later, Bumpy understood something most people don't. Power isn't about who has the biggest gun. It's about who controls the conversation. That night at Rao's, Bumpy controlled every word. The partnership lasted for decades. Through changes in leadership, through wars between families, through arrests and prosecutions, Harlem remained semi-autonomous, operating under the agreement Bumpy had negotiated that September night. Bumpy Johnson died in 1968, 32 years after that meeting. He never had to fire a shot in that room, never had to threaten anyone, never had to prove he was the toughest guy there. Because he proved something more important. He proved he was the smartest. Now, there are no official records of exactly what was said in that room. No transcripts, no recordings. The specific dialogue exists in the oral histories passed down through both Harlem's community and the Italian mob circles. What we do know for certain is this. By 1937, Bumpy Johnson had established a working relationship with the Italian families that protected Harlem's independence while providing mutual profit. This arrangement was unique and New York's organized crime landscape. Whether every word happened exactly as the legend tells it, the impact was real. Bumpy Johnson walked into that meeting as an enforcer and walked out as a power broker. The legend of that night teaches us something that transcends the specifics. Real power isn't about violence. It's about leverage. It's about understanding what the other side needs and making yourself indispensable to them getting it. Bumpy Johnson walked into a room full of men who could have killed him, but he understood something they didn't expect him to understand. They needed him more than he needed them. And once you understand that dynamic, once you can articulate it clearly and confidently, you don't need a gun. You need intelligence, courage, and the ability to negotiate from a position of strength even when you're outnumbered 9-1. That's what Bumpy Johnson did that night. He didn't win through intimidation. He won through understanding the game better than anyone else at the table. 9 mobsters. 1 black man. No weapons. Just words. And the words won. If this story changed the way you think about power, negotiation, and real strength, hit that like button right now. And if you're not, subscribe to Bumpy Johnson, the Harlem Godfather yet. You're missing out on these legendary stories every single day. Subscribe and turn on notifications. Drop a comment and tell me, would you have the courage to walk into that room unarmed? What would you have said to Lucky Luciano? Remember, in Harlem, respect wasn't given, it was earned. And Bumpy Johnson earned every ounce of his. This is Bumpy Johnson, the Harlem Godfather. And we're just getting started.